All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Etienne Venter from PZ Africa. So we are a small team here in Africa supporting Atlassian Jira and the Symbio product suite. And a nice sunny day here in Cape Town. And today I'm going to give you a brief overview of managing requirements in general, and then specifically how Symbio does it and the integration to Jira. The agenda, so what I would like to cover is just, I think everybody understands it, but just to set it in context, requirements management, basic overview, then the solution that was developed by Atlassian Jira, the solution architecture, and then there's a short video that will be distributed after the session as well with the slides. So without further ado, I'll go into the requirements management overview. And I think just to set the context, I just slipped in this slide quickly now before during the break. Maybe everybody is not aware of what Jira does, but Jira is a bunch of stuff. So in essence, it's a plan, track, and release world-class software type product. You also have Jira Service Desk, Jira Core for non-IT related products, and Jira Ops. So today we're going to focus more on the first one, so the Jira software, although the same functionality in Jira is shared across all the modules. So in technically speaking, the development work that was done now would be applicable for all the modules within Jira, which is good. So going into requirements, and there are many people with many words around it, but I mean the basic of requirements is to get a common understanding so that your project team has a common understanding of what they're actually working on and what they're actually developing. We all know that poor requirements management is a leading cause of project failure worldwide, and I think the Agile method has enhanced this, that it actually becomes better in terms of collaboration, but this also then requires tooling that supports the collaboration effort that is based on the Agile principles. So one of the first big benefits of managing your requirements is collaboration, so that multiple people in different places will actually see the same information and be able to share information on a continuous and regular basis, so that they all have this common understanding what they're working on. So here, my little slide, you've got people in Germany and us here in South Africa, and this is quite a reality. So we thousands of miles from one another, yet we're working on the same software, managing requirements. So that's just a practical example. The second thing is it should be trusted. So with other words, it's fine having requirements defined once, but requirements go through the life cycle and it gets changed regularly. And you have things that get added, acceptance criteria get added, you get links to design artifacts, it's associated to business processes, then it gets changed, the process change, and all of those things has a life of its own. But ultimately, you want something where the requirements can be trusted and it's supported by proper release management, which in this case, the link between the Symbio and Jira world, you will see also a little bit later, does that perfectly. So the trusted aspect is very important. Traceability is another one, which is a key benefit. As you can see there, you've got, depending on the life cycle that you follow, this is just one example of it, but this is a typical project life cycle, and through that whole life cycle, you want to know where the requirement is, which areas it's touching, but it's also not just in one project, it's also how that requirement is affecting other projects who potentially has got the same business process, same applications, same interfaces in scope for their areas, so that everybody, regardless of the project team where you're working in, has got a common understanding of what is affected and what is impacted. So understanding change is basically what I'm trying to say here, so that if you have a change, regardless of where in the cycle the change happens, that everybody understands the change, it's managed, it's went through the proper versioning, it is released, and that the workflows behind the scenes actually enables teams and it becomes a seamless experience. So it's not a cumbersome, difficult experience. I know we always joke, but a lot of these agile coaches, they sell these concept of sticky notes against the wall, and there you go, these are your requirements. The reality is that's not a solution which you can actually manage across teams with different floors at an enterprise level. Therefore, understanding change requires proper tooling, like in this case, Symbio and the Jira integration. Lastly, making your data work for you. So once you've got all this data about your project and the associated requirements managed and worked on by various people within the Symbio repository, that information can now be harvested by running multiple reports on top of the Symbio database to actually get different views in terms of the requirements lifecycle. And obviously, it's not just for requirements, it's for all artifacts within the Symbio stack. But since today we're focusing on requirements, you would like to understand at a portfolio level where are your requirements and how is your company doing it with its various projects across teams, across different locations, and so forth. And that gives you the ability for managing the data. So you've got it all in one place and it's trusted. Right, so the solution overview. So on the left, it's a slightly busy slide, but if you think about requirements and just don't think about requirements as the user story, that is one aspect of requirements. But if you think about your life cycle, you have a strategy which has got strategic goals. Then you've got your whole enterprise consisting of processes, data, applications, IT infrastructure, and so forth. From there, if you've got the ability to do a gap analysis, you can understand which areas in the business are the weak points or the pain points, and which areas you will have to fix or have some initiative to actually optimize it, which drives your projects. So your project portfolio. Your project portfolio is then broken down into, and we covered this a little bit earlier, Mikael, with you, with the new features. So in the project facet of Symbio, you've got the ability now to unpack the detail of that project further. You can associate the project to the in-scope business processes. Once you've got the in-scope business processes, you obviously know the in-scope data, you know the in-scope systems, you know the in-scope roles, and so forth. Lots of things. Then you get down to the process, and now you can start understanding the gaps in the process and where you have to optimize the process, which is supported by applications, data, IT, and you get your requirements. So there at the bottom, you see your requirements. Now, all of this is managed very nicely in the Symbio stack, so from top to bottom. So you can do all those things in Symbio, and you can do it very effectively and very easily. However, on the other side, you have many, many companies who use Jira as a let's call it a project management tool or platform to execute agile type projects. You also have lots of companies using Jira as a service desk platform. So if you think about linking your delivered solution, at the end of the day, you start getting change requests, incidents, problems as issues. You also would like to trace that back to the whole enterprise architecture, with other words, which things are impacted. So in short, on the right-hand side for today, if you look at the Jira cycle, you've got your product backlog. So the requirements that was now identified in Symbio is seamlessly migrated to Jira, to a Jira project. And in that Jira project, that requirement goes through the cycle in terms of sprint backlogs in the sprint until you get a working solution, a working software going out. But as we said earlier, that requirement can now undergo changes and status changes along the way. And those two worlds needs to be integrated so that you can actually have a trusted view of the requirement, as we said earlier. And this is exactly what is happening now with the integration between Jira and Symbio. So in short, Symbio, a fantastic platform to not only design your solution, but also to use it as an integrated management system. And on the other side, Jira, a good platform to actually manage project delivery in the sense of agile projects, for instance. And like I said earlier, I'm hammering the agile thing here. It doesn't just have to be agile. It could be waterfall as well. If you're still on a waterfall approach, it's fine. Requirements is still requirements. You will just have a different cycle in Jira then. So in Jira, you configure your workflows. Either it's a Scrum board, a Kanban board, or any other combination that you want. But basically, a requirement will still be a requirement. Another busy slide. But here you can see at the bottom, well, at the top, first of all, that's the cycle. And here at the bottom, you can see the primary systems and the secondary systems out and in. So you can see for concepts, project concepts, Symbio primary system, initial requirements, Symbio is the primary system. Your target solution architecture, specifically with the new Archimate features, is Symbio. And you can see there with initial requirements, it now synchronizes with Jira, and the requirements identified in Symbio is migrated seamlessly to a project in Jira, so that the two projects are synchronized with one another. The product backlog, however, now once it's in Jira, you use the functionality of Jira. Let's say, for instance, you use a Kanban board or a Scrum board. You use the functionality in Jira now to assign tasks, to start following the requirement through the stages until the requirement is realized or done. But Symbio is always in the loop, so any changes that happen with that requirement in the Jira space is updated with Symbio on the other side. That goes right through through the life cycle until at the end, which I mentioned that in an ideal world, once you've done the project, you've delivered the solution, you will now start getting in your operations and support, you will start getting change requests, you might get problems, you might get incidents, and so forth. And your service management platform, and if it is Jira Service Desk, or it doesn't have to be Service Desk, could be ServiceNow, any one of those platforms, BMC Remedy or whatever, you can now actually have access to a sound enterprise architecture to understand the impacts of the proposed change. So requirements management, quite holistic. If we look at the solution overview, so here you've got a typical Symbio user who will define a business process. So here they will actually go into Symbio and they will make enhancements to a business process. So they will model the business process in Symbio. They will then identify potential gaps in the process, i.e. people, process flows, data, and so forth. But those gaps will now be articulated as requirements to close the gaps. So you will go to the requirements facet and you will start listing your requirements, and the requirements is then managed in Symbio, and either as a user story or in normal text-based fashion, you can actually describe the requirements. You now associate the requirements to the activities on the process, so you've got a link between at a fine-grained level, so now you understand where in the process the requirement is actually applicable, and whether at the activity level, you also understand the systems, you understand the data, you understand the roles. You've got a lot of information associated to that activity, and that's the area that you're going to try and remedy by fixing it and by going through the development lifecycle. You link the Symbio requirements domain to the Jira project. Now, what that means is in Symbio, your requirements is structured hierarchically under domains, and that domain on the Jira side, you have a thing called the Jira project. So here, what you do is, and you'll see a little bit later in the video, you're now building the handshake between Jira and Symbio. So, in other words, the Jira project and the Symbio requirement under the domain is now associated with one another, so that whenever Jira changes, Symbio will know about it, or if Symbio changes, Jira will know about it. So once requirements are, once you've done this linking, the requirements are then sent to Jira for the ones that you've selected, because there might be some requirements that you haven't released yet and you haven't you're not happy with them yet. So you actually choose which requirements should actually be migrated to Jira. And once it is in Jira, Jira takes ownership of the requirement. So Jira then becomes the source application for handling the requirement through the life cycle until it's done. So in Jira, you've got your Jira user. So they manage the requirements in Jira by defining tasks, assigning tasks, and tracking tasks. And each one of those aspects is automatically then synchronized back to Symbio. So there's always one version of the truth between Jira and Symbio in regarding the state of the requirement, which is fantastic. It's like working in one product, basically. So maybe a bit more technical now, but I think nice to see is behind the scenes, there's a team from Francois here from South Africa, and then guys in Germany, and or from Plutzenzella, been working hard in building this capability. And here's just a slight overview of the capability. And it was quite an intriguing process. So in essence, the first step that happens here is Symbio requests a list of Jira projects. That's the first handshake. So once you've done that linking of the domain in Jira, in Symbio to the project in Jira, Symbio requests a list of all Jira projects. Now you understand which projects are in Jira, and you can actually see them in Symbio. Second step, now synchronize the Jira requirements to Symbio. So any requirements that was in Jira will go to Symbio and send Symbio requirements to Jira. So bi-directional. So in essence, in the Jira environment, you have a project. That project has got now a backlog of requirements, either created in Jira directly, because that's also allowable. So and also the requirements that was identified against processes, you would now be able to get them all in one project, for instance, in a Scrum board or a Kanban board in a backlog in Jira. And the important fact here is that although you have now followed the path by identifying and defining requirements in Symbio and then migrating them to Jira, it is very possible, and in most cases very practical, that when a team actually is now working on a project in Jira, that they will start identifying new requirements. And instead of going to Symbio and first creating it there, they can actually create it in Jira. And by creating it in Jira, it will be automatically synced back to under the domain in Symbio, where it could then be associated to the relevant processes and activities in processes. So that's what happens over there. When any changes that happens in Jira, for instance, a new requirement that is created in Jira, or a change requirement in Jira, or a requirement was deleted in Jira, or a requirement been moved between projects in Jira, all of that is managed by this Symbio to Jira microservice and keeping the two worlds synchronized. So you always have this trusted environment, which is, I think, fantastic. And my hats off to the development team who actually did this. I think they've done a fantastic job. All right, so I'm going to show you a little video now. Unfortunately, it looks like the sound is just nice, soothing music. It's not coming across when we play the video, but when you get the slides, you will be able to listen to it. But basically, the video is going to cover the 5 key things, which I've addressed now earlier. So linking the Symbio domain with a Jira project, so creating that handshake. Then creating a requirement in Symbio, and then how it actually lands up in Jira, and creating an issue or requirement in Jira, and deleting an issue or requirement in Jira, and moving an issue and a requirement in Jira. Maybe just some terminology here. Jira talks about issues, because as I showed earlier, Jira is used for multiple purposes, not just for project management, but also for things like service management in the IT space. So an issue can be a requirement, it could be an incident, it could be a bug, it could be a problem. So many types of issues. So the stereotype is an issue, but it could be different types. The superset is that it could have multiple stereotypes. That's what I mean. So in this case, we're focusing now on the requirement. All right, I'm going to play the video now, and I'll sort of just give you a bit of commentary as we go through, but the video is quite self-explanatory, I think, but let's go. So first step, linking Symbio domain with the Jira project as we talked. So yeah, I'm in Symbio, and here you've got the Jira interface and requirements in Jira. So now you choose the project in Jira. Okay, as you can see, it's project A. So creating requirements in Symbio. So under that project, which is now already linked to Jira, you start creating requirements. Symbio now already knows it's linked to Jira, to the right project in Jira. You can now use the stereotypes to say if it's a user story or epic or whatever. Now you select, you want to send this to Jira. And there it's already done. You can see the link in Jira. If you go to Jira, you will see it. So there it is. And you've also got the link back to Symbio on the right-hand side. We will get there now. So there we go. So nice handshake between the two platforms. And now you'll see you can't change the requirement in Symbio anymore. You have to do it in Jira. So now I'm in Jira and creating a requirement. For instance, Epic. Under that project, it now knows which domain it has to go to Symbio, because we've done that handshake already. Create it. So it sits in Jira. Start adding stories to that epic. So you have a parent-child relationship here. Epic has got multiple stories. Create it. You link it to that epic. Create it. Okay, so now you've got the linking there, and then voila, you go to Symbio, and there it is. You go to the epic, and you got the parent-child epic and requirement between the two. Again, grayed out, so the source is now Jira. So deleting an issue on Jira or requirement. warns you. Gone. Go to Symbio. In Symbio, it will tell you it's been deleted. Moving an issue on Jira, but in other words, between projects. Now it sits under Project B in Symbio. So a very seamless experience. Clever. And there you go.